September 13, I'm Jarrin Jackson. Bible-based commentary powered by the gospel of Jesus Christ, his death, his burial, his resurrection. Believe the gospel, don't go to hell. Today we're going to be talking about Wargaming, the post-Petrodollar world. The post-Petrodollar world. Stay with me for this one. This one's important. It's going to be a lot of nitty-gritty technical stuff, but I think this is important moving forward. There's a lot of news about inflation. There's a lot of news about spending in America. There's a lot of news about the instability. I think it is necessary for people who are trying to figure out what to do moving forward that they understand kind of the things that are in play. I read an article last night talking about how Russia is winning the financial war. This is from Gold Money. This is a blog talking about all sorts of stuff. This is from June 22nd. Talks about how sanctions have backfired on those described by Vladimir Putin as the unfriendly nations. It is setting in a series of events likely to undermine the whole Western financial system as prices rise, driving interest rates higher. The economic activity shrinks. These developments alone are leading to contracting bank credit, crashing stock markets, and sharply higher bond yields. No, I am not about to start to sell you gold. I'm not about to start to sell you some type of insurance. I'm not going to do those types of things. What I want to do is speak very frankly about one of the ways that you can understand how the world is organized. And if you understand that that is a theme of how people organize their activity and of how it marshals decision making, you can start to see the stitches on the fastball. The long story short is to read your Bible, believe the gospel, and organize locally. There's your solution. Read the Bible, believe the gospel, organize locally. Having said that, to do a deep dive, you can start to understand that the way that the world is starting to become unstable, people are trying to fight for the currency. Right now, the US dollar, the petrodollar, backed by our oil commodities, tightly linked with OPEC there in the Middle East, the centralized banks. The US dollar is the global reserve currency, and this is of chief importance understanding the instability and the tensions that people see right now. You can explain everything through the instability and the diminishing power of the dollar. See, for decades, the US dollar has been what the global reserve currency It's been the global reserve currency, and so other nations have had to anchor their economies to the dollar. If you wanted to play on the global level, you had to use US dollars. That is becoming less and less influential. But because all of these other nations are still tying their currencies to the US dollar, they still got to play the game while the dollar is there. Meanwhile, other countries, like Russia, like this blog post suggests, are shopping for alternatives. And because they've been so thusly tied to the US dollar for decades, they don't know what to do. And so while they're simultaneously shopping for alternatives, the people in charge of the petrodollar in America are doing something that's incredibly manipulative. They're destroying the dollar and thereby all the economies tied to it. And so you can see that the Titanic is purposefully being destroyed, which is going to tie all the other economies that are tied to the dollar and bring them down. And so other countries are trying to look at alternatives and to jump ship and to organize other ways of currencies and other relationships. But in the meantime, because the dollar is so big and robust and the global economy is so globalized, it's a race. It's a race to the dollar's destruction versus an alternative. And that the issue here is trust. Let me be very clear. The core issue of any and all currency has always only ever been trust. What do you trust? To simplify this, Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount, you cannot serve two masters. You cannot love money and love God. Why was that so important? It's because if you love money, you're able to shape your existence. And so the people that are in charge of the dollar, the petrodollar, are shaping the world's existence right now. And they've realized that they've extended their skis, whether by accident and greed or by design because they want to have disaster capitalism. Whatever explanation you attribute, you can certainly recognize that $30+ trillion and counting is not mathematically sustainable. The dollar is dead. It's just that the world doesn't know what to do after that. And what you're seeing right now is the wargaming of the world. Every country, in its own fashion, is wargaming what to do when the dollar completely busts. That's what's going on. No one for a second believes that $30+ trillion of debt is sustainable. This is not something they're going to hitch their wagon to. It's not something they're going to continue going forward. Last year, I looked into something called infinite banking. And this is off the topic, but infinite banking is this concept where you treat yourself as the bank. And I almost signed this contract to do an infinite banking thing. You can, do your own study if you want to. R. Nelson Nash is the way to go. But I didn't sign this because whenever I asked the insurance company, do you guys do alternative currencies? Do you guys do Bitcoin, or do you guys do cryptocurrencies or gold or anything else? They said, no, we only do dollars. And I ultimately didn't commit to being my own bank because I don't trust the US dollar. In short, what you have is because the United States has been because the petrodollar has been the global reserve currency, anybody who wanted to play on a global level had to have US dollars. This is why other nations have US dollars in their debt. This is why other nations speak in terms of how their currency is in relation to the dollar. But because there's so much debt to our dollar, people now, understandably, mathematically, obviously, see the fact that the dollar is worthless. And you can see this from when the purchase power, this is one of the easiest ways to tell, the purchase power for the US dollar is just deteriorating. We're seeing this today with inflation, and historic inflation. Yes, it's because Joe Biden is, horrible, his economy's bad, but it's also as a result of, since Nancy Pelosi has been Speaker of the House, we've added 40% of the country's debt since she's had the gavel. It took us 215 years to get $14 trillion in debt. And it's only taken us 12 years to get the next $14 trillion in debt. The math doesn't add up. And so if you look back to that poll quote from that article, the end of the petrodollar, it's basically saying, look at Ukraine. Look at the military, but put the military to the side. The war in Ukraine is not about the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is about multiple parties positioning themselves and wargaming about what the future of the world currency will be. Quote, we should realize what really matters to us all is the real war, which is Russia's attempts to banish American hegemony in Europe. That's what's at stake. The U.S., well, I'll just keep reading. While in the West, we have an image of President Putin as an evil despot determined to take Ukraine back under Russian control. In his speech in St. Petersburg International Economic Forum last week, which was back in June, Putin's diagnosis of the world's problems was that it more to the point than anything you will ever hear from our dear leaders, Joe, Boris, Emmanuel, Olaf, et al. It is worth citing relevant extracts from the official English translation of Putin's speech to highlight his economic understanding of the pickle we, the West, have gotten ourselves into. So this is a quote from Putin, of Putin analyzing the West and Putin speaking to his people. Surging inflation in product and commodity markets have been a fact of life long before the events of this year. The world has been driven into this situation, little by little, by many years of irresponsible macroeconomic policies pursued by the G7 countries, including uncontrolled emission and accumulation of unsecured debt. These processes intensified with the onset of the coronavirus in 2020. When supply and demand for goods and services drastically fell on a global scale. So you have an element of economic calamity brought on by the disaster capitalism in COVID. So that's one aspect, is that the people in charge of the U.S. petrodollar were either using or benefiting or certainly exploiting the fact that coronavirus shut down the economy. All you have to do is look at the mass transfer of wealth from the middle class to a small group. Which companies benefited from the coronavirus? Not that hard to see. But what Putin is saying is that he got into Ukraine because Russia wanted to turn the screws against Europe with energy. What's going on in Europe right now? They can't pay their bills. Italy, the people are burning their energy bills. Germany is looking to see how they're going to heat their homes this winter. Russia made a power play because Russia supplied majority of gas in Europe. And because Russia turned off those pipelines, Russia is trying to separate Europe away from the United States. Meanwhile, the United States is getting heavily involved militarily in Ukraine. Why? Not because we care about the Ukrainian people, and it's not even because we care about the military-industrial complex. It's that we're trying to destroy the dollar so that we force all the countries that are currently tied to our currency to accept whatever we offer next, which is the digital dollar. Focus, folks, this is what's up. To make this point, The Hill reported yesterday, a couple days ago, that Zelensky to headline the U.S. Defense Industry Conference. Pull quote from here, says that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will address the U.S. defense contractors later this month when he headlines the annual Future Force Capabilities Conference. What does the Ukrainian president have to do with the Future Force Capabilities Conference regarding our national defense? How does the Ukrainian president have any input on the future capabilities of America's fighting force? You should be asking yourself that. What does Ukraine have to do with the future scope of national security in the United States? And why would he be to the military-industrial complex's Oscar Gala? Why would he go to the main marquee event, the Super Bowl of the National Defense Industry Association? Why is Zelensky there? News of the appearances were first reported by Reuters, which noted that the officials would speak via video link. Zelensky is expected to appeal for more weapons for his country during his speech. There it is. Zelensky's the salesman. Zelensky is appealing for more weapons to his country. Why does that matter? Next paragraph. News of the Ukrainian president's speech of the NDIA, whose membership included the defense industry giants like Raytheon, guess who politicians they buy off, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, comes as Kiev looks to fend off Russia's invasion as it drags through its sixth month. This is not about preserving Ukraine. This is about making Ukraine a bleeding ulcer against Russia. If Russia can't take over Ukraine, Russia will have a harder time separating Europe from the United States. Which means that as the dollar continues to go down, Europe will be tied to America. Europe will not be free to choose to be tied to Russia. That's exactly what's going on. And so America's military involvement in Ukraine, with Zelensky as the salesman, is about making the effort for Russia to make it harder for Europe to pull away from America. Don't doubt me. As this article goes on, Putin's play is basically twofold. At stake is the agreement President Nixon made with King Faisal in 1973 to sell oil exclusively for dollars, tying the kingdom to the American banking system. It was an astute move by both parties at the time, allowing Sheikh Yamani leading OPEC to raise the oil price from $3.50 per barrel more than tenfold over the next 7 years, and to ensure the world needed dollars to pay for it. There can be little doubt that when Putin pulled the same trick on the EU with respect to oil payments in rubles, the MBS, that's the current system, would have noted the parallel with wry amusement. In short, Putin did to Europe what America did to Saudi Arabia back in 1973. America gave Saudi Arabia and the OPEC nations the ability to tie their oil fields into the American banking system. And by the American banking system indexing its currency, the petrodollar, to oil, which it got off of the gold standard in when? 1973. So whenever it got off the gold standard and it tied to the index of oil, it also happened to join the largest oil fields at the time in the planet, OPEC, Saudi Arabia, and that's why there's so many Saudi interests directly tied to American interests. It's about banking, folks. 1973 was the day, well, that was the year whenever the American petrodollar was adopted as the global reserve currency. Since then, it's been decades of global reserve currency. Globalism took off after that because no one could compete with the energy that America's hegemony dominated. Because America could dominate the oil and the provision of industry, no one could compete with the American dollar. And so they were able to drive through a Keynesian economic viewpoint the need for materialism, the development of monopolies, the politicization of juggernauts like big tech, big pharma, all these other places were able to dominate the landscape of our economic behavior. That's why mom and pop shops are out of business now, because you've got Walmart, you've got Facebook, you've got YouTube, you've got big banks. The big everything has dominated everything because underneath all of it was the necessity to focus on the dollar. No one could compete. And because no one could compete, they were able to dominate. They're losing that with our $30+ trillion. We continue. This gets down to, let me focus on this. This gets down to the second paragraph. The Arabs are not stupid. In 2014, I was told by the director of a major Swiss refinery that they were recasting gold bars for Arab customers from the LBMA, that's the London Bullion Market Association, 400 ounces to the Chinese 1 kilo 99.99 standard. This means that in 2014, Arab countries started recasting their gold away from the London standard to the Chinese standard. Today's 2022. So 8 years ago, you want to tell me that the Arabs started recasting their gold away from London standard to Chinese standard. Why would they cast the gold standard that way? Because the Shanghai Cooperation Organization looks like that. This is what is emerging as the offset, the counter, the alternative to the United States. These are the countries in play. These are the countries that are starting to reorient away from the petrodollar. And why does that matter? We go back to that post. Because Russia has basically two options. Russia's two options are basically, there's a currency to replace the dollar. That's what they have to do first and foremost, required for cross-border trade settlements, which can be freely converted into rubles by the state and Russian commercial interests, thereby limiting the buildup of foreign-owned rubles available on foreign exchanges. And then there is the domestic ruble itself. So basically, Russia has to create a currency. This author's perspective is that Russia is using its energy assets feeding into Europe to pry Europe away from America because the American petrodollar is dying. America is fomenting war in Ukraine to preserve the allegiance and the dependence of the global currencies that are tied to the petrodollar as the people in charge of the petrodollar destroy it. How do I know they're trying to do that? Because yesterday, the Wall Street Journal said that Fidelity weighs Bitcoin trading on brokerage platform. This is Fidelity, which is a Western petrodollar underlining hedge fund, is starting to weigh cryptocurrency. Why would they do this? Pull quote. I'll skip all this because I'm running short on time. Very last paragraph. When Fidelity opened up its 401k accounts to Bitcoin, industry executives came to believe it was only a matter of time before the firm moved to allow brokerage customers to hold crypto in their accounts. Some of its competitors, including Robinhood Markets Incorporated, have access to digital assets as a key selling point for new generation of investors who have started trading everything from stocks and options to Bitcoin in 2020. Meaning, they're programming people to start accepting cryptocurrencies as commodities, as justified investments. Cryptocurrencies is software. So people are now starting to get used to the idea of selling and buying and trading and investing in software. And now one of the largest hedge fund managers with 401ks are now weighing the options of including that as a potential investment. Do you see the exchange? The exchange is we currently have the petrodollar backed by the monopoly of energy assets that America has been building on for decades. And now they're exchanging it for the cryptocurrencies. That's exactly what's happening. Why would this be the case? As the article concludes, it says here that perhaps the greatest hurdle Putin must overcome, and that for Xi and China, is the intellectual corruption of their advisors. Many of them have been trained in the Western economic and monetary fallacies. The guy in Russia's poor comprehension of catalactics, we'll get to that in a second, has been pointed out. And in his speech in St. Petersburg, Putin referred to economic growth. This is not the same of what users use the term growth thinks it means, which is economic progress, and that's a common error. Here's the key. Misled by Western macroeconomics, it is likely that Putin's advisors will caution against an exchange rate tied to commodities as being too strong, undermining the export trade. So while people are trying to figure out what the alternative to the petrodollar is, they will still make the underlying false notion that currencies necessarily have to be controlled by governments. This is a lot of stuff. Don't let me lose you. America's dollar is dead. Too much debt, too much exploitation, too much market manipulation and materialism. The problem is, for the globe, most of the world's reserve currencies are tied to the dollar. So the people in charge of the US dollar are quickly trying to destroy the concept of the dollar before anybody else that's tied to the dollar can jump ship. Russia has invaded Ukraine to pull other countries off the dollar by taking away their energy consumption. Basically hostaging them. You can't have warmth. You can't feed yourself. You're not going to be able to have your basic necessities. Get off the dollar. Leave the dollar. Leave the petrodollar. As a result, Fidelity and other banks are starting to say, yeah, we'll go ahead and start taking cryptocurrencies. We'll go ahead and start taking this stuff. And why did this matter? Because yesterday, the White House put out an emergency or an executive order on biotechnology, biomanufacturing, innovation for sustainable, safe, and secure in America bioeconomy. They're introducing the concept of the bioeconomy. Here it defines the purpose. Policy. It is the policy of my administration, Biden, to coordinate a whole of government, that means communism, approach to advance biotechnology and biomanufacturing towards innovative solutions in, look at this, health, climate change, energy, food security, agriculture, supply chain resilience, and national and economic security. He wants biotechnology that's applicable through all elements of your society. Tell me what aspects of our society aren't impacted by health, climate change, energy, food security, agriculture, supply chain resilience, and national and economic security. Do you see what's happening? Do you see what's happening? This bioeconomy, the economic activity derived from biotechnology and biomanufacturing, referred to as the bioeconomy, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, has demonstrated the vital role of biotechnology and biomanufacturing in developing and producing life-saving diagnostics, therapeutics, the V word, and protect Americans in the world. Although the power of these technologies is most vivid at the moment in the context of human health, get this, they're expanding this, biotech and biomanufacturing can also be used to achieve our climate and energy goals, improve food security, sustainability, secure supply chains, and grow the economy across all of America. What are they telling you? They're telling you that they want bioeconomy to be infused with what's going to be the future currency, the digital dollar. And as the petrodollar is being destroyed, I believe, purposefully by those who control the petrodollar, seems to be the rest of the world is trying to figure out what the alternative to that looks like. Now, I don't want to be a doom and gloom guy. because I can't control all this stuff. You can't control all this stuff. And it doesn't help to be fear-based. The Bible talks about this. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. God says, be fruitful and multiply. You should look at your work as a form of worship, to glorify God, to produce, to engage the creation, the time, the talents, the opportunity, the people that God has put in your life. You should steward for his glory, but also for your provision. If you do that, you're going to be good regardless of what the system is. Don't think of the world in terms of the currency system. That's part of the problem. I could get into this more, and maybe we'll do this more moving forward. But it's pretty simple. You live local. Thanks for your help today. Here's some venison. Thanks, buddy. No, how are we supposed to tax this transaction? And that's the IRS. That's the scheme. That's the scheme. That's the way forward. The way forward is you love your neighbor. The way forward is you honor God. The way forward is that you use what you've got to impact the world. That's how you need to think. That's how we need to move forward. The people in charge of the petrodollar are going to continue to do what they do. The Russians are going to continue to do what they do to try to pry people away as they come up with their alternative. That's the geopolitical. That's the strategic. That's the global. You can't impact that. You can't influence that. You can't stop that. A lot of people would take right now to look at Revelation 13 and say the mark of the beast and the digital currency. You can't stop that. Stop trying to stop what God has said will happen. Stop trying to stop what these big globalists have oriented everything towards for decades. What you should do is recognize your ability to wrangle your own assets and have the local benefit, the local product yourself, which is why we push Live Local. Hi, I want to encourage you to go to livelocal.store and join up to be a Live Local member. There are 3 levels at livelocal.store. The first is the supporter. That's the $5 level. That's just saying, thank you, Jarrin, for the free content that you do. We appreciate you. We just want to help you continue to keep it ad-free so you can stay gospel-focused. The builder level. That's the second level. For $10 a month, there are opportunities for you to see the premium content. Right now, there are already 11 videos that are me explaining the gospel as warfare. There will be more stuff moving forward, just to know that that's the level that's going on there right now. And then eventually, we're going to have the changer level. That is going to be Zoom calls. Now, I created that graphic, but eventually we're going to have Zoom conference calls where it's me doing deliberate engagement with you guys at the changer level, and that is to actually put Live Local into action at your local level. Moving forward is the vision of building local cultures of consequence where we are, and that's what we're going to be doing through the changer level at livelocal.store. Join today. One of the ways that we got here is because the information that people let in through their eyes and in through their ears is horrible. Last night, it was announced that Norah O'Donnell had her salary slashed more than half at CBS Evening News. The point here is that here she is she's 48, she's making $3.8 million now, down from $8 million. The media is losing its grasp. As the media loses its grasp, it will naturally respond to those market forces. Amen. But the media hasn't been telling the truth. They haven't had the betterment of we the people at their heart. They've wanted to program and try to give illusions and cast spells on people to have them understand the way of the world. But as more people are migrating away from that, they're looking at alternative sources of information, which is why people like me are in a box on the internet talking about stuff that we're talking about to people like you. Another failure is a guy named Brian Stelter, who just left CNN, was fired from CNN, and now he speaks at Harvard. And what he's going to do at Harvard, he's going to convene a series of discussions about threats to democracy and the range of potential responses from the news media. You can find more out about this by this book right here by Duff McDonald called The Golden Passport, Harvard Business School, The Limits of Capitalism and the Moral Failure of the MBA Elite. What's going on, in short, is you have institutions of prestige that don't actually do anything. What they do is propagate and brainwash the people that go to these institutions, such that whenever the people who go to these institutions get to the positions of power by virtue of them having gone to the institutions that are brainwashing them, they then promulgate, perpetuate, and advance what they were taught. Not based on truth, not based on critical thinking, and not based on the goodness of society or the preservation of human liberty. What they do is they take the lie, in this case, Brian Stelter saying that there's threats to democracy. And by taking his lies, the people that he teaches will then, because they get hired because they've gone to Harvard, will continue to propagate that stuff. It's the system of telling you what to think, not how to think. Pull quote. Says here that according to Harvard University's website, the Sorensen Center on Media, Politics and Public Policy, as the Walter Sorensen Fellow, Stelter will convene a series of discussions about threats to democracy and the range of potential responses from the news media. Goes on to say, the statement also reads the discussions with the media leaders, policymakers, politicians, and Kennedy School students, fellows, and faculty will help deepen public and scholarly understanding. Scholarly. Brian Stelter was a music major. He's a music major. Talking to CNN about the current state of the information ecosystem and its impacts on the democratic governance. Needless to say, America is not a democracy. America is a constitutional republic. In May's survey, it was revealed that only 6.4% of Harvard graduates lean conservative, which tells you that Harvard is not a proving ground for robust, dynamic, critical thinking. It is an indoctrination camp, where if you consider the fact that it is the golden passport, what it's really doing is saying that I'm from Harvard, give me a job. And because I went to Harvard, I think like you, and because what I think like is what you want, that's really why you're going to hire me. Not because I can, but because I will. Amen. Not because I can do the job, but because I will carry the torch of what Harvard told me to think. This, of course, also manifests yesterday. Chuck Todd, the celebrated news personality that he is, had a question that he asked Kamala Harris. Listen to her answer and listen the pass that the media gives her. Watch this.
Final topic here. Since we're here in Texas, I want to ask you about the border. Would you call the border secure?
I think that there is no question that we have to do what the president and I asked Congress to do. Is the first request we made. Pass a bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure, but we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration. But there are still a lot of problems that we are trying to fix, given the deterioration that happened over the last 4 years.
She's just dumb, and she's a liar. The border's not secure. Illegal immigration is the number one political problem that we have in this country, is that we are undermining our country by bringing people in who are not supposed to be here. They are illegal. Taking jobs, destroying our culture, bringing values that suck. They're destroying the country. But it's the fact that the media gives her a pass. It's the fact that they don't press her on that. Chuck Todd said, are you sure? Are you confident this is secure? The common sense perspective is there's 2 million people that have crossed the border this year. The border's not secure, Madam Vice President. How can you say it's secure? But then her reasoning, it's secure because they think that it's secure because countries need to have a border. This is the type of non-critical thinking, non-truth, deceitful, magical, fantastical lies that the media has propagated. This is the war for in the eyes and in the ears, for the domination, the key terrain of the mind, for the prize of the soul. What you give your attention to is what you worship. And what these people have done is they've gained, or they've won, or they've seized people's attention. And for so long, they've lied. This is why you need to do an information audit. We have in the Live Local Field Manual, what page is this on? Number 36. The information audit is, we the people do not make all thoughts captive to Christ. Very short. You need to take to heart. Who do you give your time to? Who are you listening to? What sources of information do you have? Now, this is one of my main criticisms, and we'll take this further, is that there's a lot of people that are really good at saying stuff sucks. A lot of political conservatives. Political conservatives, I believe, have a better grasp of the reality of the day. They're conservative. They look at the way that things have been and they say, we need to stay in touch with our traditions and our culture and the way that things have been, because we understand that better than, let's say, changing genders, destroying marriage, allowing kids to make decisions from puberty blockers, those types of things. So I believe that conservatives are default in a better position to explain the world just because they value the way that it has been instead of the uncertainty of the things to come. At the same time, that if conservatives are just always complaining to you, if they're always just saying that stuff sucks, okay, what do you want me to do? Like, did you know that things are really, really bad? Oh man, I'm so glad that I listened to this show that told me that things were bad. You need to be able to do something about it. This is, maybe this is the former infantry soldier in me. If you're not going to try to paint for me the conditions of the in-state, if you're not going to say live local, if you're not going to say localize your food supply, build out networks with your neighbors, if you're not going to say those types of things, if you're not going to try to point me in the right direction, then all you're doing is getting me riled up, getting me mad. For what purpose? I'd argue that if people just do nothing but get you angry, that's really a form of control. And the controlled opposition is to get you angry without directing or channeling where that anger can actually go accomplish something. This is the discernment I believe that conservatives, Christians, need to have moving forward. Is if you got a lot of people saying that stuff sucks, yeah, Captain Obvious, what do we do about it? Yesterday, President Biden was talking about the discovery of mRNA technology, and now that its application has been so successful with COVID-19, it now needs to be applied to cancer. Watch this.
Prevent cancers. Just exploring whether mRNA vaccine technology that brought us safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines could be used to stop cancer cells when they first arise.
Now, I am someone whose father is currently suffering from stage 4 cancer. My dad is dying. His faith is good. He's going to go home whenever God calls him. So please pray for Dad. There's always hope. He still draws breath. Amen. I am someone who would want the cure for cancer. My dad is suffering from that right now. It's not good seeing him getting amputated and ravaged and radiated and just it's not good. Watching a family member ravaged by cancer is not a good thing. At the same time, and I got to do this, saying that technology that saved the world because of COVID, I can't do it. Saying that technology that was the response to COVID is now going to be the cure for cancer is just too opportunistic. Especially whenever you have tweets like this from the Pfizer CEO saying, excited to see at POTUS inspiring action through the Cancer Moonshot Initiative. What does moonshot sound to you like? One way or another, cancer touches all of our lives, and at Pfizer, we know we must continue our work to advance breakthroughs to combat these daily diseases. Do you see what they're dangling? They're dangling the fact that you won't die from cancer. I don't want my dad to die from cancer. I don't want other people to die from cancer. It's a horrible, vicious disease. But I'm a Christian. We talk about the gospel here, the death, the burial, the resurrection. You are going to die. What's it? Hebrews 9, 26, 27. It's appointed once It's appointed once unto a man to die, and then comes a judgment. You're not getting out of this alive. So the subtext that you cannot die from cancer is a distraction. It's gaslighting from the fact that you are going to die. And so at Pfizer, Biden, and all these other people that are trying to get you distracted and gaslit away from the certainty of your death to now the promise that you're going to not die as early as they say you are, not only discounts the fact that these technology isn't doing what people thought it was going to do. Not only is the fact that it's not backed up by science and every animal through clinical tests died, but now it's this idea that whenever people are suffering from cancer, they'll just say, oh, there's a shot for that. Oh, there's a treatment for that. Oh, well, good. I'm glad I don't have to die now. I'm glad that I'm guaranteed to die later. This is why we need to talk about Jesus. This is why we need to talk about the gospel. I spoke about the executive order that Biden signed yesterday. He signed this executive order. Here's a pull quote from this, where Biden talks about biotechnology. This is later down in this executive order. Simultaneously, we must take concrete steps to reduce biological risks associated with advances in biotechnology. We need to invest in and promote biosafety, biosecurity to ensure that biotechnology is developed and deployed in ways that align with the United States principles and values and international best practices. Blah, 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 blah. At the very bottom, he's talking about safeguarding the United States bioeconomy. He's created this idea, that of bioeconomy. Yesterday, that's what happened. Joe Biden basically just said, I'm going to create a word. To the national pressure. And now bioeconomy. Now that we've created bioeconomy, we're going to secure it. Do you see what they just did? They created a word, and then now they're imbuing it with context. And now that this word that they've created now has the context that's basically everything. Healthcare, food systems, supply, and defense. They've created this word, they're imbuing it with context, and now they're elevating it to where it's now this most important thing. I believe that they've failed, and I believe they know they've failed at climate change and making climate change the thing. So now they're going to talk about this bioeconomy. So where climate change didn't fail to get traction or failed to get traction, bioeconomy, I believe, is their new page in their playbook to get that traction. And if climate change is now underneath bioeconomy and, agriculture and food systems and defense and everything else, that's what they're looking for. They're looking to reframe existence to fall underneath the umbrella that they just into being, which is what they just did. How do I know that? Well, they're telling you. The Section 4 of the executive order they signed yesterday says, in order to facilitate the development of the United States bioeconomy. See, again, they just created it. It's just a thing. They're going to establish the Data for Bioeconomy Initiative. Data. They need data. What's this data? What are they talking about? Remember, folks. Remember. They got Albert Bourla, the guy who's the CEO of Pfizer, who's going to put stuff into your body. And the CEO of Pfizer putting stuff into your body now benefits from this executive order that created the Bioeconomy Initiative. And to help this data initiative, down at the bottom, the director of the OSTP, in coordination with the director of OMB, and heads appropriate agencies determined by the director of the OSTP, in consultation with external stakeholders, shall issue a report. So basically, the federal government created an idea, bioeconomy. It infused that idea with relevance, with significance, with political gravitas. And it did this in coordination with other pharmaceutical companies that are just happen to be rolling out technology that cures cancer, or at least claims to. You see what happens? They're dangling the promise of not dying from cancer underneath this auspice of now we're going to do everything in a bioeconomy. Remember what I started out with. We're talking about the dollar, the petrodollar, and the wargaming of the post-petrodollar world. It seems to me that the West has said that they're going to have a bioeconomy as the alternative to the petrodollar. Chipped, bagged, tagged, data-driven. And if you think about this from an algorithmic perspective, remember yesterday when we spoke about Amalgamation Bank and the woman, Priscilla Sims Brown, that was pushing this legislation to try to social engineer the destruction of the Second Amendment using banking technology? And she spoke about algorithms that could track and do stuff, even though she said she wasn't going to track it. You now have the auspice of tracked, algorithmic-driven decisions underneath this bioeconomy. Climate change is underneath it. The food supply, the defense, the justice system, everything is underneath this thing. This is the West's war game. Data-driven. Integrated with pharmaceuticals, integrated with the promise that you're not going to die. There's a lot that's here. There's a lot that's here. And that's why they're doing it. How do you get people to be distracted from high inflation? How do you get people to be distracted from all the global instability that seems to be screaming out, the petrodollar is dead? You promise them the cure for cancer. You promise them that you're going to be able to solve all their problems. All they got to do is get chipped. All they got to do is take this drug that happens to be rolled out right now. Leadership is a big deal for me. I was an Army officer. I really don't like the highfalutin, elitist, smug, erudite leaders. If they haven't been on the ground and they can't paint the picture for the dude on the ground for what victory looks like, I just don't like it. This is a quick example of what I mean. Watch this. So we had King Charles III that was like, move this thing that holds my pins because I'm about to sit down and I'm tired. I need a nap. So you got the new king of Great Britain or United Kingdom. He sucks. And he's saying, oh, help me out, do this stuff. That dude, he's a horrible leader. And then you got President Trump. Marine's cap, his cover is blown off, and he picks it up and he puts it back on. That's the leader of the free world. Commander-in-chief of the military. Putting a piece of uniform back on his guard, his Marine. There's good leadership and there's bad leadership. Here is an example of good leadership. Now, I sped it up. It's not to be No, I didn't speed this up. So here's an example of good leadership.
And careless attack.
Correction. Here's an example of horrible leadership. I got good leadership that's next. This is horrible leadership.
And careless attacks don't add up to a plan for Canadians. Attacking the institutions that make our society fair, safe, and free is not responsible leadership. Telling people they can opt out of inflation by investing their savings in volatile cryptocurrencies is not responsible leadership. By the way, anyone who followed that advice would have seen their life savings destroyed. Fighting against vaccines that saved millions of lives, that's not responsible leadership. Opposing the support and investments that have helped save jobs, businesses, and families during the pandemic, that's not responsible leadership.
Yeah, I should have sped that up. So that's Trudeau talking about his opponent, Pierre Blvd, the guy that basically said he wants good government and not, grown government, which is good. So Trudeau is just saying what not good leadership is, but he's framing it all from a policy perspective. Do you not recognize the guy's a World Economic Forum. The guy is framing leadership from the perspective of government agency. He's not framing it from the perspective of principles, right? His principle is government solves problems. And that's bad leadership because that's looking to someone else to solve your problems. That is that's a communist perspective, which probably makes why he looks like Castro. There is another, so here's an example of good leadership.
September, you also had a movement amongst some local governments to force the fire, the police to do a COVID jab or else potentially lose your job. And we said that that's inappropriate in the state of Florida. You should not have to choose. You shouldn't have to choose between a job that you need and a shot that you may not want.
Amen. And the principle that Governor DeSantis is maximizing there is that your labor is yours. You engage the world that God created. You should do it to glorify Him, but you engage in the world with your work, your time, your talents, your opportunities, your relationships. You get the benefit from it, and other people can't tell you what to do with that if it takes away from that. So there's some underlining philosophy that I agree with Governor DeSantis on that I reject and disagree with Trudeau on. I want to get at this idea though, because Governor DeSantis pointed out, what if you don't live in Florida? And what if your job tells you to violate your medical conscience, go against science, data, and wants your personal medical decisions to be overridden or conditional for terms of employment? What would you do? The Live Local Field Manual has something that I called a work map on page 245. The problem, we the people need to have a plan to oppose tyranny from monopolies. The idea that I go on to talk about and address at this time at 3.3, third section, is you basically need to have a flash union. So you've got workers that unionize, that can bolster or negotiate pay, terms of employment, safety conditions, all sorts of other stuff. But there are other companies that don't have unions. And so a work map is basically a flash union. Let's say, for example, you go back into the COVID lockdowns and an employer says you have to take this or else you lose your job. Live Local has in it by the time you get to section 3, to the collective part, by the time you get to section 3, you've had the ability to identify people that work in different companies. Now, let's say that there's a private company that says, we're going to put this condition on you and you have to take in order to work. Well, would you not want the ability to have a flash union that would allow your teams, and you'd have to kind of read the book, but you have to, have these teams and have this organization in place that if you are going to be forced to take a jab in order to have a job, Live Local provides the offset in order for you to rapidly organize and for people to help provide for your provision so that you don't kowtow to your company's demands. In short, you have to realize that the government wasn't the driver for a lot of the tyranny. It was the business sector. It was the monopolies. It was the corporations. And so it was this 1-2 punch of government mandate or government advising through the CDC. And then it was the private sector imposing that. So the 1-2 sector put a lot of Americans in a flat-footed position. They didn't know how to respond. The work map in Section 3 of Live Local, the Live Local Field Manual, speaks to where you can organize so that whenever that happens, you've got the ability to not only withstand the government dictate, but the corporate tyranny that compels your private medical decisions. Just wanted to point that out because if you don't have a state that has a DeSantis, if you have a state that you've got some morally weak people, some GOP Republicans that aren't going to recognize that your rights are defended by government instead of the corporations or the medical directives by CDC or Anthony Fauci, if you don't have that, you need to organize at your local level. That's the Live Local Field Manual. What was that page? Page 245. Page 245, and that's at livelocal.store. Amen. I want to point out some just obvious, glaring, stupid problems that local governments have. For example, California has said that they'll start to give a $1,000 credit to people who don't have a car. This pull quote here goes on to say that California residents who don't own a registered vehicle could receive a $1,000 tax credit each year for 5 years starting next year, thanks to a bill, SB 457, that now awaits the signature of Gavin Newsom. The momentum for such a tax credit comes on the heels of regulations of California Air Resources Board adopted August 26 to ban gas-powered vehicles in the state by 2035. They're really going for this net zero emission. This is the bioeconomy. This is the climate change type stuff. That's what's coming. What's ironic to me is that you have people that are saying there's not enough lithium to provide for the batteries needed for electric vehicles. So California is going to give you a tax credit to not have a vehicle. California is going to ban gas-powered vehicles by 2035. And then banning the gas-powered vehicles creates a situation where you have to have an electric vehicle if you want to have a vehicle. But watch this video.
Really quickly, we've heard these targets of half of all new cars being EVs by 2035. We just heard out in California, it's going to be all new EVs by 2035. Do we have enough lithium in the U.S. to meet that demand?
You know, not by 2030 or 35. The answer is yes. We'll have enough, but not by that time. I don't think. I think it is, which is good for us. I mean, there's going to be a real crunch to get the material. We don't have enough in the world to turn that much production in the world by 2035.
Okay. Well, it means a lot of opportunity for you.
Good opportunity for us. That's lithium prices are up. We're happy.
Piedmont Lithium's president and CEO Keith Phillips. Appreciate you stopping by the studio today.
Thank you very much.
That's called disaster capitalism. You use government to create beneficial financial situations for the people that are already in control, and they just admitted they don't have the supply that's going to be able to meet the demand. Invest in lithium, folks. Bill Gates tweeted out yesterday that he is so happy that a school in New Jersey has adopted climate change as part of its curriculum. This is the tweet from yesterday. This is great. As I'm going to read this as Bill Gates. This is great. New Jersey is setting a new standard by taking climate curriculum one step further. Not just telling students what's happening, but also them asking them what they can do the world about it. I can't even read like this guy. Why is this important? This is from the school. This is from the New Jersey school right here. This is important because these are actually impacting decisions. Schools doing stuff. Remember that portion earlier in the live stream where I was talking about the golden passport? where you've got levels of indoctrination telling people what to think, not how to think. And as a result of it, you've got people that believe stuff. The earlier that you can plant ideas into people's minds, the more significant those beliefs will be held, and it's going to be harder to undo them or to change them as they grow or as they age. I believe that this is a pipeline that's going down along this way. And there was an article that was said, this is a BPR, where Randy Weingarten, she is the president of a large teachers union. She's admitting that teachers are social justice warriors. Watch this.
Teachers, essentially are the first responders to all of this. And what they ask for is they ask for respect. I often tease that should not be just a great Aretha song. And people would want to be teachers if they knew they'd be respected. Very few teachers thought that they were going into teaching to be social justice warriors. But then when they can't teach, I'm a social studies teacher, the Diary of Anne Frank, you can't teach about Louis Bridges. You can't answer questions of children. You have to be mask police. That has been what has created some of the burnout. And that's not parents, that's politicians. Parents just want the best interests, or want best for their kids, and so do teachers.
Teachers Union president is on her heels because teachers are, like she said, becoming social justice warriors. Now, her argument, she's trying to reframe it, saying that these teachers didn't want to do that. They're just doing that because of politicians. It goes back to, I'm just following orders. They're just teaching your kids stuff, folks. That's all. They're just following orders. They're just following orders. You know what? After this live stream, I'm going to go drink some water. But I'm not going to go to Jackson, Mississippi to drink any water. Why? Watch this. Yeah, that's disgusting. Here is the Jackson, Mississippi mayor giving his explanation to why his residents have water like that.
You mentioned the need for capital. In March 2021, federal government sent $42 million directly to the city as part of the American Rescue Plan. In August 2021, President Biden said this when he signed off on the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Never again can we allow what happened in Flint, Michigan, and Jackson, Mississippi. Can never let it happen again.
It's happening again. In fact, it's getting worse. Where's the money? Why isn't it?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, first and foremost, I've had very extensive discussions with the president and the vice president concerning the federal government's desire to help, and we look forward to that. We have committed the grand majority of our ARPA funds towards our infrastructure, not only at the water treatment facility, but distribution lines. We've spent $8 million on one pipe alone in South Jackson, which is disproportionately affected. It is also critical for people to know that the city of Jackson didn't get $42 million at one time. Merely a little over a month ago, we got our second tranche of the funds. We have made a commitment to spend the remaining dollars. There was some choice to spend some towards public safety issues. And so we are committing the lion's share, the overwhelming majority of our funds towards this challenge. However, it is insufficient to meet the great need of 30 years of deferred maintenance and accumulated challenges. And so it will take a coordinated effort on not only the local, state, but federal levels as well.
That guy, before he was running, as he was running for office, said that he wanted to make Jackson, Mississippi the most progressive city in the world. Seems like he's accomplished his goal. You notice what he's talking about. What we're all talking about is water. Everyone needs water. Your body is mostly water. The earth is mostly water. You need water to live. And here in Jackson, Mississippi, they are going on weeks now with water like that. They can't live in those conditions. And the government, at the local level, the mayor level, is complaining about the federal government and the fact that they're not giving them all the money. And then he even shifts the blame and kicks the can down the road and says, oh, it's not me and my utopian ideals. It's the fact that for 30 years we've neglected this infrastructure. And that may be the case. But the point is that you've got government looking at water that's horrible and disgusting, and people can't live like that. They can't drink that. That's not good for them. And yet while they're trying to struggle and solve the people's problem, the people still need the water. Jesus taught in John chapter 4, verse 13, Jesus answered and said unto her, the woman at the well, Whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again, but whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that Jesus died for our sins. You and I are sinners. We have broken God's law. Jesus paid the fine. When you believe in Jesus, you have everlasting life. You don't need anything else. That's what he's saying. The woman who was an adulterer, who was an outcast of society, the dregs of society, she was an outcast. She had to go to the well at the middle of the day during the heat because no one wanted to be around. She was humiliated. If you are humiliated, if you are the outcast, if you are beat down, if you are someone that's not welcome, doesn't matter. You're going to have to keep going back to the well. You're going to be thirsty. You're going to need. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you don't need anything else. And it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how horrible of a person you are. Jesus goes on to say, he goes, verse 23, But the hour cometh and is now, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. This woman was an outcast based on what she'd done. And she didn't want to come to God because she hated the religious system, the religiosity. You have to worship here, have to go here, have to say this, have to wear that. You have to be approved by society. She hated the religiosity of the system. She was in need of the water. She was in need of worshiping God. But she couldn't do it because the system that was telling her she had to meet their goals and jump their hoops, she couldn't qualify. So she was not good enough for the people that were imposing a system on her. She was an outcast. Hear me clearly. You and me are sinners. We don't measure up to God's standard. But yet because Christ came, he did away with all those standards and he says, come to me. Come to me. Come to Jesus. Believe that Jesus took your sin. Believe that Jesus died on the cross for you. Believe that Jesus rose from the grave. And you worship in spirit and truth. It doesn't matter what your hand signs are. It doesn't matter what words you say. Whether you sit up and you stand up and you sing 3 songs. Whether you go to a building with a big screen in a paved parking lot with big Cadillac Escalades out in the parking lot and people with nice clothes with their auto-deducted, tithing payments to the church. You don't need that. What you need is to worship in spirit and in truth. Which means that you have to have faith in what you can't see. Faith is the evidence of what is not seen and it's the hope of what is to come. The gospel is how you are saved. It's how Jesus saves people. It's not through your religion. It's not through your churchianity. It's not through all this other crap. It's the gospel. The death, the burial, the resurrection. Believe the gospel, my friends. Folks, we want to keep this ad-free, no corporate sponsors. We want to keep it gospel-focused. To do that, please help. LiveLocal.store is the best opportunity, whether it's merchandise like this hat or it's the level of membership where you get the premium content that we have. We are in a position now, Lord willing, that people won't cancel us. We've been canceled by PayPal, Venmo, and all sorts of other things. I also don't want corporate sponsors because I never want the gospel to be moved out of the focus. That's the center of what we do here. I want people to go to heaven. I don't want people to go to hell. In the meantime, the Live Local effort, I believe, is the best strategy moving forward. It's not hope in politicians. It's not hope in man-made institutions. It's recognizing what God has given you, organizing it, and engaging the world with what he's blessed you with. I think that's God-honoring. I think that's what we need to do. And by God's grace, if I'm the one that can help people do that, if I can contribute that, that's what we'd like to do. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Please continue to pray for my dad, Lord willing. He will make a miraculous recovery and will kill that cancer. Amen. And also, Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow, September 14. Until then, I'm Jarrin Jackson. I do love America. Don't quit. Don't you give up. Gospel forward. Go to war.